This is episode 28 of Soundproofist, and my name is Carrie. Today, we're going to talk about gunfire noise. Specifically, we'll talk with a community of people in Cranston, Rhode Island, who live near an outdoor gun range where the local police department practices with hundreds of rounds of ammunition. Although the facility has existed for a long time, it's getting used more often by officers with higher-powered weaponry, and that's causing more stress. In addition, the gun range is right across the street from a high school. We're going to talk to some of the neighbors and to health experts about the situation and some of the possible solutions. So, let's get started.
My name is Martha DeMeo. I live in Cranston, Rhode Island, and I live in a neighborhood where hundreds to thousands of bullets on any given day are fired. My neighborhood sounds like a war zone, and this isn't hyperbole.
My name is Patricia Schoninger. I live in Scotland Road in Cranston, Rhode Island, and I am subject to having my boundaries being stepped on.
I'm Dr. Patricia Ritchie. Hello. I became involved when actually Dr. Mangilli had contacted me that Martha was planning to appear at the Cranston City Hall to make a statement and wanted to have professional feedback about the effects of sound, the negative effects of sound on human beings. And so I attended one meeting, and we didn't get to speak at that meeting, but then I returned and was given 4 minutes to present a statement, which I did extemporaneously. And the only feedback that I received was that I was a very good girl because I had taken exactly 4 minutes. I live in Cranston as well. However, I do not live in the neighborhood where they are suffering this terrible injustice, but I'm extremely empathic to what they're going through.
I am Melissa Jenkins Mangilli, and I am a neuropsychologist and a trauma researcher. So I specialize in the effects of traumatic events and how they affect especially the brain. I've spent my career, several decades now, mostly at Brown University and teaching in the School of Medicine until this past year, about how trauma affects the brain and how neurophysiological changes result from these traumatic exposures, and how people recover or don't recover from experiences like war, domestic violence, even accidents, injuries, other traumatic events. So Martha contacted me about this problem a few months ago. And, I used to live in Cranston. I no longer do, but I know people there, including the mayor, and I know him to be a very kind and empathic person. I was really shocked that when he heard this was happening, he didn't immediately stop it. So, I think the immediate stressor of being exposed to this gunfire on a daily basis is horrible enough. But compounding this now is the ongoing refusal of city officials to take them seriously, that Martha and Patricia are reporting serious adverse consequences from something that their city is doing, and nobody seems to care. And that is really just astonishing, and I'm completely empathic with their situation. They deserve better.
Let's assume that most people listening to this podcast don't know anything about what's going on. So what I'd like to do is just start by giving us some background information about the gunfire noise that's going on in these Cranston neighborhoods from the police academy. How long has this been going on, and has it been getting worse over time?
I can give you the little history of the range. So the police range, they started using that location for target practice in the middle of the last century when there was 40 officers on the police force shooting pistols. Now there's over 170 officers on the Cranston force, and it's no longer just pistols. They train on automatic and semi-automatic weapons. So there's military-grade weapons being shot in a civilian neighborhood across from schools. Additionally, it's not just the 170 plus Cranston officers. They started renting it out to other police departments. Anyone from across the state can come here, and we're a small state, and we're centrally located, so we're convenient to every other city. Additionally, other police departments, private organizations, and the FBI come to my neighborhood to shoot guns. Now, I literally crossed paths with the retired police chief, Mr. Kenneth Mancuso, who I did a man on the street interview, which I have loaded up to YouTube, where he states these facts. The current spokesperson for the Cranston police will give you different facts about who's shooting there. So he told me emphatically it's on video. They use automatic weapons and the FBI has been there, goes there.
That's interesting because I listened to a recording of what sounded like a radio interview with the current police chief. And he did say that there's times when the police officers, they need to be qualified or tested for something. And there's 153 officers coming to use the range, which is a lot of people. That's a lot of guns. I don't know how many of them are shooting all at once, but even if they took turns, that would sound like it would go on all day long.
And they shoot together.
Oh, they do?
Actually, when I had attended a meeting at the mayor's office in December of 2021, there were two majors at the meeting, and they told us that they shoot, for their qualifications, they have to shoot 100 rounds, and they have 3 guns that they have to qualify with. So you're doing 300 rounds per person. So do that times 150. And that's not including the other police departments that are also qualifying because they come here for their state qualifications. So do that times all of that, and that gives you some idea of when they qualify. But that's not when they're also practicing, because they have to practice all the time. This is what we were told. And that they also have to do night shooting because there's a difference in the atmosphere and whatever, I don't know. I've never shot a gun, so I don't know any difference. And I wouldn't know. So, when you start comprehending that, plus when the Rhode Island Municipal Police Academy come here, and last year there was over 60 cadets, they also train over here and they all shoot at once. And there's a picture actually that I just actually saw today on the site for the Cranston gun range. And it shows you a picture of officers like laying down and they're shooting at it. And if you're looking at the numbers, as far as I can see, it went up to 12 and there's even more. So you could have 15 guns going off all at once. You have no idea what that. It's unbelievable. I leave my home. There are days where I actually get in my car and I drive to the Roger Williams Park and sit there because I can't think. I can't live here. It's terrible. And they don't care.
You mentioned nighttime practice. What time of night and how often does this happen?
Well, actually, there is a schedule out. Well, right now they say it could be from anywhere from 8:30 in the morning till 8:30 at night. That's their hours. We actually just got a new schedule for April because that's when the cadets come in. And I don't know, Martha, do you have that information handy? I can get it right off of my phone.
Yeah, I was going to talk about that. When she wants to get into what they're doing, I thought I would share the schedule.
Yeah, I'm hoping that someone is actually keeping a journal of exactly when the shooting gunfire can be heard and match it against the schedule that you're issued.
Kerry, I hear every bullet that shot. I literally feel like I'm standing right next to the officer that's shooting the gun. That's how close I am. And the officers, even when I was at that meeting, this was a quote that came from one of the officers. And both police officers acknowledge that they are using military weapons and ammunition that are more powerful and louder than in the past years. And that the gun range is rented out. But I mean, they admitted it. They admitted that they're using military weapons. So I feel like I'm in the middle of a war. I can't tell you how traumatizing it can be. And to think that they don't care. All they talk about is how they have to train and they have to do this and that, but they totally disregard our well-being. I'm forgotten. I'm invisible and I'm forgotten. And you know what? That's not happening any longer. I am not forgotten and I'm not used to it.
Yeah. And you don't want to ever get used to that. Well, let's hear some medical opinions about this because I totally can relate to what you're experiencing. And I'd like to hear a little bit, actually, starting with Dr. Ritchie. Since you only had 4 minutes when you spoke to the council, I thought you would like to have another shot at it right now.
Another 4 minutes, perhaps. I guess I didn't give I assumed you knew my background, but I'll just tell you right now, I'm actually a graduate of Brown University Medical School and a psychiatrist. And so I testified basically describing what the normal, whatever normalcy is, someone without a diagnosis, that's how I'll classify that, would react to constant assaultive sound. It is deleterious to one's health, deleterious in physiologically. So listening to, first of all of us are bombarded with sound in ways we don't even recognize now, because with constant 24/7 newscasts and radio constantly going and media constantly bombarding our lives, we already have a higher level than any other time, I think, in humanity. In addition, listening to the sounds of gunshots raises our levels of cortisol, our stress levels, in ways that can raise blood pressure, cause us to have anxiety. And that's just somebody without any background. As Dr. Mangili said earlier, someone with a history of domestic abuse, someone who's a veteran. I worked with the vets at the Providence VA hospital, specifically the Vietnam vets. They have post-traumatic stress disorder, people who have panic disorder, people who have suffered abuse in childhood. They are triggered, their threshold is much lower. So it's extremely traumatic for someone to experience that. And the levels of, deleterious effects are innumerable in people like that. Combat, people who have been through combat, people who have suffered physical violence or have been involved with gunshot exposure in the past. It's just traumatic, and they suffer huge impact from this. But the neighbors who don't even have backgrounds of any kind of abuse are also, baseline, are hugely affected and impacted. And I started actually my talk by saying, your home should be your solace. You should go home and that should be your retreat. That should be your kingdom. When you return home, you should find peace. And obviously, these people, and it's gotten worse over the years. So when they go home, they have no solace. They have to escape elsewhere. And that's day in and day out. And then on top of that, with gun violence being what it is now, and not even talking about the children, which I didn't even get to that when I spoke at the city council meeting. Children who are in schools hearing this all day, and they have to have drills to avoid an intruder. This is so traumatic for these poor kids. Gun violence is a way of life now in our country. And the cases just in 2023, we've had so many episodes of gun deaths. So these children, what they're exposed to is, horrible beyond description.
I saw a map, and the high school seems to be quite close to the gun range, like right on the other side of the street or something. I don't know if that's a highway or a street. But to hear that when you're in high school, with all the numerous school shootings we've had over the years, I can't imagine that people adjust to that and say, oh, that's just normal sound. And furthermore, how will you know if there is an emergency when one happens? If one happens, I should say.
Carrie, can I fill you in on something about that?
Sure.
So I live 2.5 blocks from those schools. And I was having some children over one afternoon that don't go to school in Cranston, some friends, kids, and there was shooting going on in that late morning. Anyway, I called the police department, and the police chief called me back, and I said to him, what time is this going to stop? And, explained I was having children over. He told me all I needed to do was to educate the children that there's good gunfire and there's bad gunfire. And that, in fact, that's what they do at those it's Cranston High School West and Western Hills Junior High, Western Hills Middle School now. Western Hills Middle School, Cranston West, that are directly across the street. The Cranston police, per Chief Michael Wenquist, told me they go into the schools to educate the children that there's good gunfire and bad gunfire, and that I should do the same thing with the children in my life. And I posed him the question. This was right after Memorial Day 2021, the day after. If you recall, that was right after Vivaldi and right after the shooting at the Buffalo supermarket. And I said to the chief, okay, the education part, you don't need to be a psychologist to know that's ridiculous. I said to him, if we have a mass shooting in my neighborhood, how will we know the difference? And he said to me, it will take a few minutes. So that's the state of the management in Cranston, and the mayor defers to the chief on all of this.
That's interesting. It's completely ignoring the needs of people who actually live there. And the assumption that people aren't home during the day. You know, there's an assumption like you should be at work all day long. You won't hear this. And even if that were the case, kids are in school during these hours and they're closer to this sound than anyone else in the community.
And there's also moms with young children. And I actually have a couple of stories of women that I spoke to when we were collecting our petitions. I had spoken to a woman who I asked her about the gunfire, how she felt, and she lived over in the Mechanicat Lake area. And she told me when her children were young that she used to feel guilty when she used to put her children down to sleep because they were going to sleep hearing the sounds of gunfire. And she didn't know how that would affect them as they got older. I had another woman who lives right over here in my neighborhood. Her son was sick home, and she's consoling him, rubbing his back and all of that. And the gunfire is going off. And as she's rubbing his back, his body is twitching every time a gunshot is fired. I mean, how much more? I thought when I brought up the children that would have been an immediate response. They don't even talk about the children. They don't mention anything about the kids in school. What they did say is they've never gotten any complaints from parents. Well, there was I witnessed two parents complaining at a city council meeting. And at that city council meeting, and it was actually in the Cranston Herald, also the local newspaper. Okay, well, this gentleman, he's lived in the area for 25 years, and both of his children go to Cranston West. He said last year his daughter had a new teacher who didn't know about the training facility. When she heard the gunfire, students explained the situation to her before she notified the principal about needing to go into lockdown. Robinson said she was in disbelief. Additionally, at his son's track meet, the son's friend from Burrillville, which is another town in Rhode Island, heard the noise and dropped to the ground. Robinson said his son laughed at the friend. He said the sound was just a normal thing to hear. Then another story, another track meet. And you know how they have the starting gun?
Oh, right.
Well, they had to cancel the meet because they had so many false starts because the children couldn't do the difference between the starting gun and the gunfire that was going on across the street. So that does tell you that children don't know the difference between good gunfire and bad fire, does it?
No, and actually that's when the police chief said that someone should have asked him, how can you tell when you hear it which one is good and which one isn't? Because guns were designed to inflict harm regardless of who's using them for what purpose. That's what they're for.
Absolutely. Yes, and that's what the doctors are saying right here. These two very intelligent doctors are telling you that the brain doesn't distinguish between any of that.
That's right. Yep. Well, Melissa, you've been so quiet. I would love to hear from you about this, the psychological impact on people and your experience with working with people who've experienced trauma.
Yes, thank you. I have seen so many patients who have trauma histories, veterans who have been exposed to actual war conditions and hearing a sound that sounds like gunfire. The 4th of July, every single veteran who's been in war is an emotional wreck. They don't want to admit it and they don't complain about it. So it doesn't surprise me at all that officials have not heard complaints because there is a stigma attached to this. And veterans do feel like they should just handle it on their own. So I'm not surprised that there haven't been complaints. But people who have had experiences with war or other gun violence are re-traumatized by hearing a sound that reminds them of it. It's a very emotionally challenging thing to go through one day a year, fireworks. And to think about the possibility of this happening to a veteran every single day in their own home is just horrifying. I have to point out, Cranston is the second largest city in Rhode Island. This is an urban, densely populated area. I understand the need for police training, for FBI training, for military training, but absolutely not in a densely populated urban area. The area has obviously changed since this gun range was put in place. It's an outdoor range. Rhode Island has many rural areas. There are many places without driving very far. We're only 50 miles across. The Cranston police can train easily at an outdoor location that will not disturb the neighbors. So I don't understand their reluctance to make the adjustment when they're hearing how harmful this is to Martha and Patricia, and to respond to them by saying, your concerns really aren't all that bad. It's not as bad as you think. Or we'll just tell you when this is going to be occurring and you can leave your home. Really? I mean, that's just horrifying. And Patricia brought up the closeness of the school and how this is impacting students. Every student is aware of school shootings. They have drills about this, and they have anxiety related to those drills. It's terrifying these days, and I think we're all re-traumatized every time there's a school shooting, no matter where it is, because we realize the next time could be our high school. The next time could be our child affected. The next time could be us. And so when hearing this anticipatory anxiety and thinking about how much that would be compounded by actually hearing gunfire during the school day, if you're a student, a teacher, another professional who's employed by the city. I mean, this is a city who's an employer who's bringing people into a workplace where they're hearing gunfire as part of their daily work life. Where is OSHA? This is a hazardous condition. This is serious. This is traumatizing people. And there are two aspects of this. The impact of unwanted noise, any noise, generic noise, forgetting about the traumatic impact for a moment, unwanted noise of any kind, leaf blowers, traffic noises, all of those things, those have been well studied, and it's extremely well documented that unwanted noise, not just the decibel level or damage to hearing, which is a real and valid concern, especially with gunfire. That's very loud, and the people doing the gunfire are undoubtedly wearing headphones or ear protection. The people next door to them are not wearing headphones or ear protection, and they can't do that 24 hours a day. That would be ridiculous to assume. But this is a really hazardous condition, and there's no way for them to mitigate that. I'm thinking about, there was a situation in Warwick when the airport expanded, and people who had not previously been in the line of the runway were suddenly having their houses shaking and planes flying close to their house and constant noise exposure. And the airport actually had to buy out their homes. They bought out a whole neighborhood because they had to do that to expand the airport. I think in this case, Cranston either needs to buy out the whole neighborhood or they need to move. The obvious solution is they need to move the shooting range. It's not reasonable to put people through this every day, not for another day. They know this is happening. It's accepted medical fact that this kind of unwanted noise is harmful to everybody. It's extremely harmful to people with a trauma history and to students with this anticipatory anxiety about school shooting. So it's extremely harmful to part of the population. It's generally harmful to all of the population, whether or not they know it. They are doing harm. And there are people who have complained about this now for quite a long time and are still not having their complaints addressed. And that is also harmful, to have the government that works for you, the police who work for you, who are paid by your tax dollars, who are causing harm to you.
Right. Well, it's interesting because I also spoke with people in New York City who've been dealing with the helicopter noise, with the tourist helicopters flying over their homes 160 times a day. And that hasn't been resolved yet either. And I wonder, in that instance, I can imagine is a powerful lobby. So there's a monetary issue there that they're fighting against. The FAA hasn't gotten involved, which they should have. And in this situation, I fail to see a monetary situation here other than the cost of actually enclosing or moving. But we're not talking about anyone's profiting off of the gunfire that's going on. So it seems to be just a resistance of like, we've had this here for so long. What's wrong with you that you live here or that you can't adjust? It seems to be the message that they're giving of like, it's a bunch of women who are, they're home during the day. That's not our problem. They could go somewhere else. I don't really understand why they're so resistant to making a positive change that would benefit the schools, that would benefit the homeowners. Why?
I don't understand either. And I have to say, it's like, I feel like it's the same as a landlord who's saying, yeah, okay, you see there's lead in this house and you have young children, but you haven't demonstrated to me yet that your child has been poisoned by this lead. So I'm not going to take it out. We know lead's neurotoxic and we know you have young children, but prove to me, where's your proof of their lead level? You know, they haven't eaten it yet, but they will. We know this is going to happen. This is avoidable. This is preventable.
My understanding, Martha, and you would know better than this, is that it's a source of revenue for the city because they always say follow the money, right? So it's a source of revenue for them to have other police departments come and practice there. Is that?
But let me interject because I was trying to follow the money because it started getting bad about 7 years ago where, one aspect that's important that Pat and I have a perspective is that Pat's been here 50 years. I've been here my whole life. I'm in my family home, so I grew up here. So the police chief tries to tell me what it was like before. And I'm like, no, sir, I lived here before. And it used to be when it was pistols, it was like popcorn off in the distance. But 7 years ago, when it started getting bad, I called my Ward 5 councilman, Chris Papalopoulos, and he informed me that they were now renting it out and that they were using automatic weapons. So I said, oh, well, I would like to know how much revenue that's generating because I anticipated the reply was going to be, well, do you want your taxes raised if we don't rent it out anymore? So when we got a new council 2020 election, I called a statewide because I'm not getting anywhere with Chris Papalopoulos. He actually told me it doesn't bother him. That was his reply to me. So when we got a new Democratic statewide councilwoman, I said, could you investigate that for me? How much money does that generate? She never got back to me. I got online with the former city council person and we pulled up the budget together that's online. It's not documented anywhere. This is a little piece of the puzzle that we're unearthing. And we've mentioned this in city council meetings. Well, they don't address anything we mention in city council meetings, but we're stepping on toes when we start asking where's the money and how much is generated.
So you haven't gotten that number yet. You're still investigating, or you have seen the number like on an annual basis. What do you think?
No one knows other than when we had this private meeting. I'll back up a little bit. After collecting the signatures of 100 people, I was trying to get the mayor to have a town hall meeting. He refused. But a state rep, Brandon Potter, got us a private meeting with the mayor, and there was a couple of police officers there. And he said off the cuff, oh, we take in about $100,000, but it just goes towards paying for the bullets. We don't make anything on it. So that's the story, and no one can get the official number.
So I know that there has been some discussion about raising funds of $1.5 million, I think it is, to build an enclosure, which I assume would be completely enclosed shooting range on the site that you have right now. Where would that money come from, and what efforts are being made to raise that money if it's approved?
Well, the 1.5, it was actually 1.6. So in this December meeting, Mayor Hopkins said to the room full of people, he was going to enclose it. And he looked at me, singled me out and said, do you trust me to get this done? And I looked at him and I had never met the man before. And I said, I don't know. He didn't like that answer. So he was ARPA grants had just been announced in December of 2021. So he off the cuff said, I'll get half the money from ARPA grants and I'll get half the money from a bond referendum. And he estimated it was going to be $4 million in total. Okay, fast forward 15 months. ARPA grants, it took me 3 weeks, never heard back from where that plan was going. Took me 3 weeks to call different city council people. They put it on the agenda. for the city hall to give an update to the city council. The ARPA grants has been denied 3 months ago, was never announced. And in fact, 4 million isn't going to cut it. But moreover, they haven't gotten a site plan. They haven't looked at costs. Nothing has been done. I brought to the meeting last week, the Providence police force has spent $3 million just to clean up the lead in their range. That range that we're talking about has been in use for 60 years, never been cleaned up. So what they think is going to cost to enclose it is fantasy.
I'm sorry, there's another range in Providence then? Is it outdoor also?
No, it's not in Providence. So it's Providence Police. It's in Situate, Rhode Island, which is rural. And I had suggested, we testified 3 times in city council. I said, if we can't fit in Providence, where did they go to practice when their range was shut down? No answer. But yeah, so there is another range. The city of Providence does not shoot within their city boundaries. They go to the country to shoot.
One of the things that came up already in our discussion was the idea of buying out everyone in the neighborhood, as what happened with the airport. The cost of buying out everyone in the neighborhood versus enclosing the existing facility would be astronomical, I would assume. I mean, I live in California, so housing costs are super high here, but I still think buying out even 20 houses, let's assume that it's 20 houses, but that doesn't even include the high school and the middle school, would far exceed the cost of enclosing the facility that you have right now. Not that I'm advocating that they stay in that facility. I think also if there was a rural area they could go to, but then there's always the chance that the area that they choose becomes populated in a few years with more housing, or you can't assume that that will always be a rural area. I think enclosing it, whether it's 1.5 million, 4 million, or a little bit more, seems like it's less costly than relocating everybody.
Let me tell you so there's another town, East Greenwich, which is 20 minutes from here, that has a National Guard facility is there. They had an outdoor shooting range. The neighbors and the developers complained. They didn't enclose it. What they did was they go to a military base now. I personally don't believe, I call it a military installation. I don't believe it belongs across the school in my neighborhood. It's industrializing my neighborhood. I also ran into an active duty soldier in New London, the base in New London, Connecticut. And I was asking him about this, and he said he's been stationed at 5 bases. He said, in this country, the bases that he has been at, there is not one base that the military has built, indoor, outdoor range, anywhere near civilians. Our police are now militarized, and that's a whole nother discussion. But if they're going to be militarized, they should be on a military base.
Yeah.
And getting back to the money, why Cranston, we're 80,000 people. Why should my tax dollar? No one has ever given the answer why the FBI is coming to my neighborhood, and why should Cranston taxpayers bear the burden of building a multi-million-dollar facility for the rest of everyone in the state and the government to come to? They're not looking at that funding. They're not saying, well, they said they're trying to get federal funding, but the feds don't build in civilian neighborhoods. They build them on military bases.
Right. Well, I actually have a statement here from Chief of Staff Anthony Moretti at one of the city council meetings. And this is what he says. He said, it says Chief of Staff Anthony Moretti said Mayor Hopkins hears and understands the residents' concerns. Things come down to money sometimes, said Moretti. He said, hopefully the city will obtain one or both grants, which the administration is working on with Senators Jack Reed and Sheldon Whitehouse. He said Hopkins is also working with the governor on lobbying for Cranston on this issue. Moretti said even if these 2 events fail, he suggests that the November election, residents vote for the city building referendum for $3.5 million, which, if approved, allows the city to go out to bond for a project like this. If that be the case, the mayor promises to propose in the next capital budget cycle the completion of the enclosing of the range, Moretti said.
That was September 2022, right? That meeting.
Yes, it was. Yep.
And then this last meeting last week, it was like, well, it's going before the planning board. There's many potential opportunities for creative budgeting and, just a word salad of we're putting it before the Cranston planning board now. So basically they're planning on doing nothing and they have no plan.
And I also heard the interview again with the police chief done on a local radio station where it seems to me that there's no awareness of acoustics. And I believe that they seem to think that they've already done some things to mitigate the noise, where they mentioned we have some trees planted and it's in a quarry. Well, if it's in a quarry, that probably means it's creating echo as the sound bounces across granite surfaces. So not only is this not a solution, it's actually exacerbating the sound and causing it to probably travel further. So planting trees is not a solution to gunfire, semi-automatic weaponry sounds. There's no way that trees are going to mitigate that at all.
And actually on that point, there's actually was a lot that's over that almost abuts the gun range. And that lot had been empty, but it was all full of trees and all of that. And it had been empty for, oh God, as long as I've been here, many, many years. Well, evidently, they want to put houses. They want to put 2 houses there. So they've cut all those trees down. So all those trees that were abutting the gun range are now gone. So even to say that, so it's...
Who would want to live in those houses?
I know.
Who would buy those houses?
I don't. We haven't seen anything. There's other things that has to do with it, with septic tanks and all that, because they can't connect into the sewer system because we're maxed out. Okay, that goes to show you how there's so many people that are here, that those 2 lots cannot connect to our sewer system because we're maxed out and they got to put septic in. So that tells you that you're in a very densely populated area if you can't go into the sewer system. And this abuts the gun range.
There was a house for sale in my neighborhood. I called the realtor and I said, "Are you informing potential buyers that there's a gun range?" "Oh, no, I didn't know that." So I said, so it's basically a buyer beware situation. And that's what it is. It's a buyer beware situation. And because for the housing in Rhode Island, we're at the lower end of where you could maybe afford a house. I think people are just desperate to get in a house, and people have been taught, put up with it. Like, you knew it was there, you bought in, like it was for you to figure it out. And I actually had a young dad, he testified, although he changed a little bit. He said, "Well, I knew it was there when I moved in." But now he has a 4-year-old daughter that he testified in September that he has to use white noise to put his daughter to bed. So there's a certain aspect of people at a certain socioeconomic level that, well, this is how things are and you just got to put up with it. But the people in East Greenwich, which, let me add, is either the 2nd or 3rd wealthiest community in Rhode Island, they don't put up with it. It was moved.
Actually, I used to take a yoga class when they used to be there, right on Route 2, right near where they used to shoot. And I remember sometimes on a Sunday morning, I would be in Shavasana, and then we'd hear, and it would be like, oh my God, it would be the opposite of what you're supposed to experience. And it was horrible. And that was just a tiny, tiny piece of what you experience every single day.
Yeah.
Terrible.
So that's another economic component then, is the perception that the value of the homes in the area closer to the gun range is lower, and therefore the voices of the people who live in those homes should be not regarded in the same way as you would if it was a wealthier community, which is, again, it just goes to show there is a socioeconomic component to noise and what certain groups of people are supposed to tolerate, whether it's freeway or construction or airports or whatever.
And, getting back to the range schedule, the gun range schedule, the city is in compliance that it's okay for me to hear 12 hours of gunfire. And the students, they actually at a city council meeting said the city is very compliant with it. They have no problem with the schedule.
Well, they don't have a problem with the schedule, but they don't live there. Yeah.
Yeah. It says it was at the meeting that we were at on October 24th regarding the schedule of the police range, and that the city was compliant. Mr. Moretti of the mayor's office stated, regarding the schedule of the police gun range, that the city was compliant with it. And the schedule for the range that week was it was Monday, October 24th till Friday, October 28th, from 8:30 a.m. till 8:30 p.m. And it said moderate shooting. So they have no problem with it. So now how can you have a government your city government that's compliant. Why would they listen to anything that we have to say? They don't see anything wrong with it.
Because they're not the ones experiencing it, though, Patricia, right? And one of the things I think would be very effective is when you are testifying to bring the soundtrack of what you listen to as you're speaking and as they have to speak. They don't experience it. And I bet they wouldn't allow you to do that.
Really sadly, there are so many people who just have the attitude that it's not a problem for me, therefore it's not a problem. And really, there's just this trend toward failed empathy, I think, in our country these days, that
almost like a desensitizing, isn't it? Like a desensitizing.
Yeah. And that, I have to say, that's really the most disturbing part of this, to hear people who live in Cranston perhaps, but not as close to the situation as you, who just say, this is not a problem for me, so why are you complaining? That they really cannot empathize with your situation at all. And that honestly disturbs me more than anything else about this. Civil rights are never a matter of majority rule. It's not ever a matter of this has to affect the majority to be a problem. If one person's civil rights are violated, that is a serious problem. And more than one person's civil rights are being violated here. You absolutely have a right to the quiet enjoyment of your home. It's a civil right, it's a legal right. And you have every right to insist that the police stop training in your neighborhood at levels that you can hear daily in your home. This should not be happening. I don't want to normalize this in any way, shape, or form. Even if some people think that that's okay, it is not okay. Your civil rights are being violated. Your legal rights are being violated. Your health is being impacted. Over time, this is going to cause serious consequences, at least for some people. And they need to take this seriously, and they need to stop this. Nobody's saying police don't need to train, but they don't need to train in a densely populated urban area. That's not reasonable.
And the police are there to protect us. The police are there to protect society. And in fact, what they're doing is injuring members of society. And another thing that's very ironic, and again, I think you would know, Martha, better than I, because I believe you've mentioned that. Coming in front of the council meeting have been incidents of a rooster or a chicken.
Yes, a rooster.
And another issue. Okay, so there were other issues that were taken very seriously by the council. Not that I'm saying that that's not a problem for a neighborhood, but in juxtaposed to the issue of gunfire from 8:30 to 8:30, it doesn't even compare. That's been brought before the council, and another issue with a laundromat making noise from the washing machines. Is that correct?
Yes, that was the most recent one.
And they've been giving that serious concern during the meetings, probably more than they're giving to these gunshots that are.
Okay, that says a lot right there. I think it could also be, in the United States, there's a polarization around guns and a lot of focus on Second Amendment rights. If you had 1,000 laundry machines going off every day on that site and it was causing a roar across the whole town, you'd probably have it shut down by now. I think everyone could agree, 1,000 laundry machines or 1,000 roosters, they would do something about it. But it's guns, and you have probably a 50-50 split amongst the citizens even, of like, there's going to be people who say, oh, the police need to practice. I think we all agree. They absolutely do need to practice. They just don't need to practice the way that they're doing it right now, in the place that they're doing it, with doing no mitigation. And all this time that they've been talking about this, that you've been having these meetings, they could have been building something to do something about it, or they could have been moving somewhere else. I asked, I think over Twitter, I saw that there is a closed gun range in Providence. I wondered why, at least for the time being, they don't use that. It's an actual gun range that's enclosed. It's not a police gun range. It's a commercial one, but it's like 5 miles away or something like that. Why has that come up at all?
I think it's because you can't shoot AR-15s. The building has to be a certain length. Don't quote me exactly on that, but I think it's because of the military grade weapons and the rounds that, like, it's that, and it's also that they started renting it out in Cranston, but that's the key. It's because of the weapons they're using now.
Well, actually, I did a little research myself about the police departments that are still using the range, and Johnston came up. And in Johnston, They actually have their own indoor gun range. It's in the basement of the police department. Why are they still coming over here to the gun range then?
Yeah, very good question.
And they just had it refurbished in 2014, and they got $60,000 from the North Providence Police Department, and it was a barter. And they got their targets and their, all the gizmos that they have in there was all updated. And in return, North Providence could use that facility.
Now, can you use the semi-automatic weapons in that facility? Maybe that's a reason?
But that is a question that I'm proposing out there is, why are they coming here?
And why aren't your police going there as well?
Correct. If they've got this wonderful place all set up.
Right.
I mean,
right.
Johnston's coming here. It can't be that far, right, for them to travel, because that's what we hear is that, Cranston police will have to travel. Well, all these other police departments and everything are traveling here. So why is it, and as you said, Rhode Island's not that big. I mean, you live in California. I mean, Rhode Island is like a county.
No other city is more than 20 minutes away, just to put it in perspective. Johnston is 2 miles up the street.
Yeah, it's so dense. I had no idea.
I want to just back up a little bit about what you said about the gun culture, because this was shocking to me. When we all first testified, there was about 12 of us from the community. And that was the night that the dad testified about the teacher going into lockdown or thinking to go into lockdown and the child hitting the ground. The first councilwoman who spoke, the first thing that this woman said was, "I'm a responsible gun owner." So they heard testimony from 12 of us, ranging from kids hitting the ground to Pat leaving her house, to me having to barricade myself in my cellar if I don't want to hear it, to not being able to function and work and being told to leave my home during a pandemic. And the first remark was, "I'm a responsible gun owner." And everybody else went around the table and was like, "Oh yeah, my wife is home during the day. Oh yeah, I hear it." There was only 2 council people out of 9. One said, "Can we at least not rent it anymore?" And she still is waiting for an answer on that. And then there was another citywide councilman that said, "We need to help these people." That's the only thing that's been expressed since last September. And as a comparison to the washing machine, they spoke 40 minutes and the things were said like, "Your problem is my problem. No one should have their quality of life disrupted." No one on the council has ever said that about us. This needs to be addressed immediately. That's the contrast. Now, initially, the police argument was it's always been there and it will never change, and that's how it is. Well, that laundromat has been there 40 years too. So the parallels are stunning.
Yeah, let me just say again, I was shocked and absolutely horrified when I heard about what you're going through. And now that I see time passing and nothing being done to address your concerns, or very little being done to address your concerns, and people actively trying to dismiss them and diminish them, I feel for you even more. I'm horrified that this is being allowed to go on, that students in school are hearing this during the school day, that veterans are not being given the consideration of not having to be exposed to gunfire. I'm just horrified and shocked that this is still going on. They really need to address this immediately. This is not okay for any length of time. And there are certainly other arrangements that can be made. You've talked about alternate solutions. Other cities do not do this in urban areas. Obviously, the area has changed and their plan needs to change.
They've outgrown this space. And just like with Martha, I dread it. I dread because this is like, shooting season is starting and it's coming in with the bang, no pun intended. It's on the schedule. They even state, oh, it's going to be consistent firing. This is going to be, like a grand reopening. Oh, we're open for business. They have no regard for us whatsoever. It's as if, like I said, we're a forgotten community that has been told for years, just get used to it.
So I'm giving a schedule. It's a bogus schedule on top of that. 8:30 to 8:30 or 8:30 to 4:30, and there may be no shooting. So I'm being told to leave my home when there's not shooting. But I want to put a call out there to any attorney listening. If this is a basis for a class action suit regarding discrimination, civil rights, personal injury, please reach out to us. We're looking for someone to represent us in this.
I'd like to thank Martha DeMio, Patricia Schoninger, Dr. Patricia Ricci, and Dr. Melissa Jenkins Mangeli for sharing your insights on the Soundproofist podcast. And I hope that your outspokenness will prompt city officials to find a solution to the gunfire noise in your community. Thanks for listening, everybody, and to learn more about noise issues, visit soundproofist.com.